Greetings, YouTube. Today I'll be diving into swords, specifically the Manus. Honestly, the Shadow itself, I was looking at the stats, I was doing some build crafting, and I do not believe it is worth my time to grind this weapon. I have, however, grinded the Manus 5 out of 5, as you can clearly see here. And the Manus, I do believe, is a superior weapon indeed. This number right here, this 2 million DPS, I really wouldn't pay attention to it because the majority of the Deus Ex's ability is going to come from the unique weapon down here, and I will go into that in the video. First, how are the swords done? First, we have the melee weapon attack. Melee weapon attack, it deals damage based off of the enemy's defense. Defense formula is 150 divided by the square root of defense plus 150, as seen right here. What this formula does is it calculates the actual damage resistance on the enemy to calculate how much damage you're actually going to be putting through with your weapon and its modifiers. And then it has crazy modifiers on it, like this bonus damage multiplier times Legion of Breach Commanders. So for the Scarab and the spawn in commanders like the Breach Spreader, this does 4 times the damage against that specific thing. None of that is calculated inside of this DPS number, so ignore the number. The bonus damage multiplier times the Legion of Immortality is a 4x on the Shadow, which means that if you're fighting specifically the Immortality boss at the end, which is the Void Vessel, so if you were to use this weapon specifically against the enemy at the end of the Void Vessel, you would think that the weapon is good because you're outputting 4 times the damage output. Next up, we have the melee weapon chill attack. This is its own damage thing. Don't think that this and the firearm chill attack are the same number. If we go down to the Lava Citadel boss, you'll see that his fire weapon resistance is insanity. This is fire weapon, which means that whether it's a melee weapon or which is highlighted next to the enemy's elemental resistance weaknesses next to their health bars. So here we can see that these enemies are weakest to toxic and crush. Elemental attribute status effect rate. This is chill attack, so I have a 25% chance to freeze the enemy. Consecutive attack damage. Whenever you attack with a weapon, you have a chance for that weapon to deal an additional damage. In this case of the sword, it is consecutive attack. On a gun, it is multiple hit. Multi-damage is the same thing as consecutive damage. I'm not sure which is the difference yet, or if they just decided to call it something else. Then, of course, we have this crazy modifier, which I assume will be on all swords. So I'm expecting 4 sword types by the end of the season. We'll see if we get them. Pierce rate. Whenever you slash and you cleave through multiple enemies at a time, the consecutive enemy at the end will take less damage than the first enemy. Here on, this one takes 551 damage on the initial hit. And this one takes 535,000 damage on the initial hit, which means going from this enemy to that enemy, there is a damage drop-off. This is called piercing rate. You can edit this with the module if you really care that much about it, but since the base stat is only 2% loss per enemy, it's really not that big of a deal. And melee weapon minimum piercing, which this is the minimum amount that the melee weapon can do after piercing through X number of targets. This is 0.7, so I cannot do less than 70% of the weapon's maximum damage whenever I swing it. I'm not really going to build into that to reduce that, because that would require me swinging through 15 enemies. The Shadows is a 0.5 with a 0.4, which effectively doubles both of those negative modifiers. Another reason the Shadow is not worth my building. Max melee weapon attack range multiplier. The melee weapons have range. I hit that enemy, but not that enemy. I have range built on the sword, but I can't go over 2x, so I'm not going to try. Block gauge. There is a block inside of the game, and you cannot block if you have no ammo. This block defends against X amount of damage based off of what your block resistance is. It also prevents you from being knocked down if you do block, and it prevents you from getting adverse effects. So if you're fighting the Scarab in the Axiom Plains or the final boss inside of the Void Vessel, you can block with the sword and it won't knock you down. It's very useful. Stat block gauge cost. There is a drain over time and then the initial investment to block. In this case, it's 10 with 2.5 maintain. Then it has a recovery amount and then an efficiency. This is how much damage is mitigated by the attacks that you're blocking. So in this case, 50% of the damage is the damage that will be dealt to you as you block. Then there's movement speed and sprint speed as normal. Now, in the regards to the Manus specifically, I'll go into the unique ability weapon and why this weapon is actually good. It maintains its effect because of its unique weapon and because I have maxed it out. Unfortunately, if you do not max out the Manus, it's only half as effective. Every time you put another Manus into the unique ability of the Deus Ex, this stat right here goes from plus, so 40 to 50 to 60 to 70 to 80, which means it's definitely worth it leveling up, unfortunately. So how it works is next to the cutoff blade of Sharon's first ability, you will see a shield looking slicey thing. This is the liberation gauge. For every enemy I hit, it goes up 25%, or we'll call them stacks. So there's 4 stacks in the maximum amount. Each stack increases the melee weapon damage by 80%. I realize that you're going to say, why does it cost ammo and mana? That's dumb. It doesn't actually cost the mana to swing the weapon. It costs mana for the additional damage and to proc a stack of liberation. So if you don't have mana, you won't get the additional damage of 10%. That's all the mana does, and it is worth the 2% whatever of your mana gauge. You also get resistance, which is a decreased incoming damage modifier 10%. This is the only reason why I would play it on Glay, more later in a later build on Sword Glay, which kind of is bad, unfortunately. Whenever you get your liberation stacks stacked, you smack down for a grand total of 4 times an attack, plus the initial hit itself. So 4 stacks of liberation will give you a 5-stack attack, which effectively doubles your damage output as long as you're swinging 4 times and then attacking with the 5th. However, it doesn't matter how many attacks you make, it matters how many enemies you hit. So if you are fighting 50 enemies at once, you can get a maximum amount of stacks if you have ammo, and trick the system into thinking that you do. I am so tired of this experiment support drone in the training yard. I complain about it in every video for a reason. This is one of the most annoying things, waiting for a cooldown on that drone. One swing, liberation explosion. This is what makes the Deus Ex Manus really, really good. Now I'll go into the build and the use cases for the Deus Ex Manus to begin with. You'll see I have the Manus components over here. I'm sure all of you are interested in if they are good. They are not, and I'll explain why. This grants Knight's willpower, 1 stack per 1 second and 2 stacks for melee weapon normal attack on the target. You'll see to the left of Sharon a little green sword. That is the max stacks. You gain stacks by attacking enemies and by waiting. So you don't just constantly get a 22% increase to your sword's damage, which makes it just straight up not worth it, in my opinion. You should just run whatever your heart desires that isn't this, because at the end of the day, I think this is a grand total of 5% damage increase from only your sword, which means the rest of your kit doesn't benefit at all, except for the melee weapon attack 6%. So if you're only dealing damage with the sword, this might be worth it, but at the end of the day, it's better just to have a better set of external components. On the sword build, faster attack speed is absolutely necessary. This gives you a 100% attack speed modifier. This is the first thing that you should actually level up on your sword. It makes the swords feel better and not sluggish. The next thing you should do is level up the melee weapon attack 35%, and then everything else is kind of up to you. I have chill enhancement in chill priority, and in this build itself, they do about 50-50. So these two modules actually end up being about half of the damage output of the sword. It's almost required to have these on there. The sword itself has a 50% crit rate, so if you build into crit with all you need is one sword dance module, core, 80% core and 12% weapon roll, and then you'll have a maxed out 100% rate on your sword. Of course, since we're at 100%, we want to increase our damage. So you want to build into critical hit damage as much as you can with your modules. The 1 point breakthrough is the best attack because you're only sacrificing a small amount of range. It's not that big of a deal. The increase range modifier, this is almost absolutely necessary. And Veil Analyzer. If your build is mainly focused on dealing damage, you definitely want Veil Analyzer because it will pop the bubbles, even if you don't have mana, even if you don't have the access to actually do skill damage. The only problem, of course, with the Manus is, of course, the ammo economy of the heavy weapon. With the Fellows, a lot of this can be fixed with the Hunting Dog of Vespers. The Vespers Hunting Dog does give you a substantial amount of ammo recovery. However, it's a very big pain in the everything to farm, to be honest with you. I am so tired of doing this Void Vessel. I think I've put in 35 hours into the Void Vessel just for 5 copies of Manus, which is insane. The devs have definitely done a number on all of us this time, but the way you play the Manus is every time you have full stacks of Liberation, go ahead and give them that Smackdown. The Smackdown doesn't actually cost mana to use, but you can just see the damage on the right side of the screen add up. 40 million, 50 million, it's absolutely ridiculous. The characters, in my opinion, that best utilize the sword are ones that don't care about ammo economy. So Glay, Luna on Battlefield Artist, and a couple of the others. For the core roles, you definitely want to maximize your crit damage, and you have to have the critical hit rate on there. You want a weapon melee attack on there and the weapon melee chill attack on there. This weapon melee chill attack combined with the chill enhancement and chill priority are going to net you a lot of damage. So please have all 3 of these on there. And then the rolls are going to be chill attack, critical hit rate, critical hit damage, and melee weapon attack. You cannot weak point with any sword, so it doesn't matter about weak point. And these are not for Colossi fighting, in my opinion. They just aren't for that purpose, so don't bother with it. All in all, my final verdict on the swords are that they are actually fantastic. Well, the Manus is fantastic. The Shadow, it needs some work, honestly. I would have to fully build the Shadow to give my absolute full recommendation on it, but looking at the stats, the damage for the Shadow just isn't there. And the Shadow has one of the biggest problems and complaints I could muster. Whenever you have the Shadow, the special ability of the Shadow just gives you a dash with some extra damage output. When you go to enhance the unique ability of the Shadow, the only thing it gives you, the only thing, is the energy gauge that you can special attack with. So each one gives you a 15% reduction in this gauge. The gauge has 200 in it, and minus 15% of the 120 will let you use your special gauge 3 times instead of 1 time per recharge. Am I going to spend another 10 hours in the Void Vessel to do that? Absolutely not. At the end of the day, I do not believe that the Void Vessel is worth the farm for what the sword provides, I would have to say, just because the farm is ridiculous for the sword. However, I still think the medium-sized facility zone is worth the farm, just not for the sword. Every time you do it, you have a 40% chance to get an entire catalyst's worth of materials. You get these on rewards, and inside of the box, you get a resource box. The resource box contains enough materials to get a whole catalyst out of it. So the resource box at 39% is actually worth it, in my opinion, because now you don't ever have to farm catalysts again after you get the sword. The gold, whatever, who cares? Not to mention the trigger module loot A. Trigger modules, these are pretty good. The supply fortress is for Kyle and another Ajax. The rhythm step is for Luna. I'm not going to use the rhythm step. I need damage. And then the wave eruption is for Nell or Blair and maybe someone else. But as long as you get those are good. You need those. And then these mutant cell box Bs, these are actually quite good. This one gives the enemy a damage reduction, and it gives you a power skill boost ratio of 17% if your HP is below 30. Basically, if you have 25% hit points, it maxes out with overwhelming shields. But what it does work is it's specifically for speed runners. There's a module called conditional recharge. Basically, you spam all your skills and you end up at 5% HP, and you proc the module and you speed run. That's all it's really for, because this game is actually a speedrunner's wet dream. At the end of the day, is the sword worth it? The Manus is worth it. The Deus Ex Manus does a lot of output damage, and I'll be doing some Descendants. I'll be rehashing some Descendants after this. Check me on Twitch if you want, link in the description. My next game is Blue Protocol. Hope to see you on there. Have a sick day, and peace out.